Thank you for staying tuned. Now, following widespread condemnation of the Naira redesign policy by the Central Bank of Nigeria and its accompanying pains on Nigerians, a 7-member Supreme Court panel ruled that the old Naira notes remain legal tender until December 31st, 2023. The Apex Court gave the ruling on Friday, 3rd of March, nullifying the federal government's decision to stop the old 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes being legal tender, which took effect on February 10th, hereby faulting government's handling of the process and declaring its methodology and implementation unconstitutional. Exactly 10 days after the Apex Court's verdict, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria on Monday, late yesterday, bowed to pressure and officially ordered commercial banks to comply with the court judgment. The development has, however, put an end to the confusion over the legality of the old Naira notes, as the action is also expected to ameliorate the suffering of Nigerians who have faced severe hardship over the scarcity of new Naira notes amid the controversial bans on the old notes. Let's get some more insight into this. And I'm being joined live in the studio again. He is a lawyer and a manager. He's with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Mr. Emmanuel Akpeme, it's good to have you live in the studio. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tolu. Nice always having these conversations with you.
Yes, so, we've been on this for some time.
Yes.
It's been like a beat, and we are getting to another phase now, where finally the CBN has come to agree that, well, we would obey the Supreme Court 10 days after. But recently, let's talk about, share your highlights or what you understand more as a lawyer around that judgment.
Thank you very much, Tolu. So the judgment, I went through the judgment, right? And It is about 56 pages, and I implore Nigerians to actually go through it. I want to commend the judges because they were really very elegant in writing that judgment in plain language. And if anybody could read a novel, they could also read that judgment. But by way of a summary, I would just want to highlight some of the major points that the Supreme Court mentioned in that decision. First of all, the Supreme Court mentioned or held that there was supposed to be a consultation by the president, right? The president was supposed to have consulted the National Council of States, the Federal Executive Council, and even the National Economic Council before it directed the central bank governor to go about the Naira redesign. And because the president did not do that consultation, then it is not valid. Although the Supreme Court admitted that the Constitution or the CBN Act did not expressly obligate the president to do those consultations, but the Supreme Court was of the view that because we are in a democracy, so this particular decision of the president or the directive will affect the various states, so he should have consulted those states before giving the directive. That's the first point. Then the second point that the Supreme Court mentioned was the fact that due notice, reasonable notice was not given. If you recall, Section 20, sub 3 of the CBN Act mentioned that there must be reasonable notice when any of this is to happen. And the Supreme Court was of the view that that press briefing that the CBN held sometime in October 2022 does not amount to valid notice as contained in the CBN Act, and that it is a mere press briefing, that for there to be due notice, there's supposed to be a gazette and other things, right? And so because of that, they held that there was no reasonable notice. The third point flowing from these two is the fact that because there was no consultation, there was no reasonable notice, then the demonetization policy is illegal. And because it is illegal, one key point here is the fact that the Supreme Court mentioned that if not that these new notes have been in circulation and majority of the old notes have been returned, they would have even stopped the new notes because they were like, yes, in entirety. Okay. But the Supreme Court was of the view that because the new notes are already there, so let the president direct the recirculation of the old notes with the new notes pending till 31st December.
And they coexist.
And so, they coexist. And then just finally, which is a point that we had mentioned in one of our conversations about the bank not paying customers on demand. The Supreme Court was very emphatic in their decision. And it is good for Nigerians to really read that judgment. Because this is a confirmation from the Apex Court. The court held that if a bank refuses to pay customers on demand, that it is illegal.
Illegal.
And so with this confirmation and affirmation coming from the Apex Court, I think banks should really sit up. So these are just the highlights of the Supreme Court judgment.
Indeed. Just like you said, not everyone seems to agree with that decision. And I don't know, why is it so? Why are they picking holes? Some will come today, analyze it this way. Some will come, analyze the other way. So why do we have in some quarters, especially among legal practitioners like you, and not everyone seems to agree?
Yes, that's why we are lawyers.
That's why you're lawyers, you see. It's so interesting. Go ahead.
There are always different sides, right? So the major issue that most lawyers have, I don't think they have issues with the main judgment itself, but they were of the opinion that the Supreme Court lacks jurisdiction to even hear the matter, that the jurisdiction and the Supreme Court lacks original jurisdiction to hear the matter, because for so many lawyers, they are of the view that the CBN is involved, and if the CBN is involved, then it shouldn't be straight to the Supreme Court. It should be maybe from the Federal High Court and not from the Supreme Court. But again, it is important to understand that the Supreme Court is final, not because they are infallible. So they examine the originating processes, which is one of the major considerations when you want to determine whether a court has jurisdiction or not. They looked at it, and in their own wisdom, they decided that they have jurisdiction, and I heard it. I would just want to appeal to as many lawyers to look at it and look at the substantial justice that the Supreme Court has done by hearing the matter. The issue of jurisdiction has been settled because the Supreme Court looked at it and mentioned that, yes, there is a dispute between the states and the federation.
Now, let's now go to where the one that everyone wants to hear. What's the implication of this around the economy, Nigerians? I still saw those long queues at banks today. People still agitated, angry. They want to get their monies. They cannot have access to it. It's unheard of when you get to the banking premises and you cannot access your funds. Now, would this decision put an end to all of these issues? Because I see the issue of compliance here.
Tolu, my personal opinion, if we are to speak legally, right, the implication of this Supreme Court judgment is that the demonetization policy is invalid and has been stepped down. And so the issue of withdrawal limits, there were circulars about withdrawal limits, and if you withdraw above a particular amount, then you have to pay some penalty or so, some costs, additional costs. That is now gone. But speaking economically and practically, I do not think, in my own view, that it will put an end to the Naira scarcity. Because, Tolu, you and I know that the issue out there is not the issue of whether it is old Naira note or whether it's new Naira. The issue is the availability of the notes, whether it is new
old or new. Let's just have the notes.
And so, in your reportage, you mentioned that this, in fact, yes, the decision was 3rd of March. 3rd of March. This is 14th.
So
over 10 days. And the Naira scarcity is there even after the Supreme Court of the land has given a decision. So I think the whole stakeholders involved need to really put their hands on deck to ensure that this cash is available. Let it be available. And as long as it is available, then...
so that means the demonetization itself seems not to have achieved its objectives. Because what are your views made it turn this way? For me, I've said it times without number, somebody didn't do something right, or somebody didn't project rightly, or somebody didn't, the outlook wasn't what they expected, or maybe at the end of the day, the projection was just wrong somewhere. That's what I think, for me.
Yeah, that is one reason, right? And the first people that did not comply with the demonetization policy is the CBN and the banks themselves.
Because they kept giving the old notes.
If you recall, the Naira redesign was a corollary, as in was a follow-up to the demonetization policy.
Yes.
When it first came up, it was withdrawal limits to go cashless. And after some uproar, if you recall last year, The CBN now said, okay, your withdrawal limit for individual is 500,000, while for corporate is 5 million. Now, why is it not available? Because if an individual can access 500,000 in a week, I don't think there will be Naira scarcity.
At all.
So the issue of the failure of the demonetization policy started from the policymakers themselves, those who even brought out the policy, because they did not make the cash available. They didn't make the cash available. That's number one. Number two, you do not just foist on the people the issue of going cashless. You do not foist on them. What advanced countries and saner climes do is you make the issue of cashless society or people going cashless to be so valuable and beneficial that even the people themselves will say, why will I want to pay cash when it is so easy for me to use my card or for me to use my phone? A case in point is Kenya. So
M-Pesa.
Yes,
everyone keeps referring to that because it's well orchestrated. You can when you look at the platform, when you look at the infrastructure, do we have it?
We don't. There was somebody who said something jokingly. He said when he goes to the restaurant to eat, and after making the transfer, he will have to sit down to wait for the restaurant to confirm that they have received. By the time they are confirming it, even the food he has eaten is already out, and he's already hungry again. So it is important that the technology infrastructure is put in place so that these even the e-transactions and e-transfer will go smoothly. So you don't foist it. You make it so much beneficial so that people can even adapt and go with it.
Talking now, if you want to make this cashless thing so attractive as you think or as you say it is, then first, I think all of these little amounts, charges should be off them. That's what I'm thinking on my own. And this has been profiled by analysts, experts, even some of the politicians have talked about this. You won't expect a woman that lives in one area, in one village, she wants to pay 1,000 naira. She's ready to pay 1,000 naira. And you're charging her 15 naira or 20 naira on that 1,000 naira. That doesn't work for her. She wants to pay 1,000 naira and she's just paying 1,000 naira. So I think a lot of work, and if you look at it, it still has to do in combination and conjunction with the commercial banks. They have to help the CBN to address all of these issues. But what are your thoughts? How do we get out of this dire situation?
Thank you so much, Tolu. And I agree with you. The issue of those bank charges is a disincentive.
It's a disincentive.
Especially for some of the class. If you remember, 133 million Nigerians are under the poverty line.
Let me add this. I don't know if you've experienced that now. I went to cut my hair on Sunday, and I went to pay my barber 1,000 naira. But he told me to transfer like 300 naira or 200 naira on it because he has to pay to get the money. And this is what is happening to everybody. So you're parting with more. You know what inflation is as of today, more than 20%. You're grappling with that. You're grappling with paying more. The negatives of this policy, I think we'll continue to see it as we move on. Yeah. But take it away, please, because it's really sad, honestly. It's sad that we have to get to this point.
Before I answer your question, imagine, let's just look back. Imagine what Nigeria has gone through the past 3 months.
Yeah.
Now, it is like
a struggling economy.
We are going around the cycle.
Yeah.
It's just about our policymakers. So the way forward is for our policymakers to have buffers, to have some things in place to say, okay, if this doesn't go this way, what should we do? Because people just say, we queued up to pay our money, the old money. Now we are queuing up to collect it back again after this Supreme Court judgment, right? So the policymakers at all levels, right, should be very, should look at all corners when they are coming up with the policies. That's what I would say.
Indeed, it's a good way to live it. Well, let's let it slide. Let's look at what plays out with the commercial banks in collaboration with the CBN in the coming days and see if this would get better, because I believe if the notes are injected and synced into the we don't know how much of the new notes that were actually produced by the minting and printing, but let's see how all of that plays out. Well, we're here. Let's continue to discuss the issues. Thank you so much, Emmanuel Kwame. It's touching when you hear people walking, trying to get money, slump, die. You hear people stay in bank for hours. People try to climb the fence to get into the bank. You see bankers running, and we had to get to this point before we really had to obey the order. It's sad to me. I believe it's just the way to go. But well, I must thank you so much again. PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's a lawyer and a manager. They're speaking around, of course, the court order and what's been playing out around that. Thank you so much. Let's move on. It's